Services, and following them, we have an update from Lieutenant Stephen Rogers. I'm going to kindly ask everyone if you can please take a minute to be sure that you are on mute right now, so that way we can hear everybody very loud and clear, and we will go ahead and get started. Thank you. Michael and Julio, it's ready for you.
All right, we'll have Mike kick it off.
Okay, Lindsay, can you hear me okay?
I can hear you great.
Excellent. All right, well, I am recording the live webinar today, so for those of you that can't join us, we can send it to you later. And we do have some availability for some chat if anyone sends questions at the end. If we have some time, either during the presentation or after, we'll be able to maybe address some of those questions, or just email myself or Julio or whoever your contact is, and we'll get those questions followed up. But thank you all for joining us this afternoon. I'm joining you from Charlotte, North Carolina, my home base with my family, and I'm leading this webinar today with Julio Gonzalez, my partner at Engineered Tax Services and Gonzalez Family Office. So again, thank you all for joining us. We've been getting a ton of questions recently on tax policy updates, of course, the CARES Act, loans and SBA status, and you know, what's going on behind the scenes in Washington as well. I know Julio and Lieutenant Rogers have been very plugged in there. So they'll be giving you some updates. And then my mission as well is to really give you some tax strategy updates of what's in that CARES Act and what we're seeing some of our real estate clients and other business, you know, small business and other operating companies really want to know about to help generate some cash flow and maybe ease some pain and prepare ourselves for coming out the other side strong. So with that, I'm going to turn it back again a bit to Julio. He's going to give us some behind the scenes of what we're seeing with some of our clients and what's happening in Washington. And then we'll go to Steve, and then I'll come back and give you some specifics of what we're seeing here on the tax strategy to be aware of. Julio?
Yeah, so listen, I think we spent the last 2 weeks helping our clients with these SBA loans, with the 7A emergency loan program and the Paycheck Protection Program. And by the end of last week, what we were seeing is that a lot of our clients were working with the smaller community banks, the local banks that they knew real well, that they had relationships with, were successful in getting those Paycheck Protection Program loans, and that our other small clients that, you know, didn't have close relationships and were working with bigger banks and trying to do this all online, you know, weren't as successful. And I know that, you know, it was reported that then the SBA ran out of the funds, the $350 billion had run out. So obviously this in DC, they're trying to reload the program with additional funds. I just saw on the news this morning that to not get more funds into this, to get those to the small business owners would be just horrible, and I would agree to that. And listen, so I think anyone that's on this webinar, I think the key takeaway here is that, you know, plan A didn't work if you didn't get your loan, so now we got to go to plan B. And plan B is you got to have those relationships with those banks that can get the process and the applications through for you versus sitting there online, not knowing, not getting feedback. I think that's a difficult place to be, and I feel so horrible for the businesses that are in those places that didn't have those relationships. We certainly can help. Mike has close relationships with smaller community banks that are actually working and still taking applications for small businesses, hoping that next round of funds came in. Now, Federal Reserve came in last week and said they're going to do the Main Street program as well, which is another loan program. The United States Chamber of Commerce said that they just came up with a grant program that you can apply to directly online. I know that in addition to these federal programs, so we have now the SBA, we have the Federal Reserve, the United States Chamber of Commerce. A lot of states have their own programs. So I encourage you to go online to your state chambers and see what's going on in the state level and the local level. And let's hope for additional funding to come through. But again, for you guys that had Plan A not work out, which is you got in line, you tried to get through the SBA program, it just didn't work out. Let's talk to Mike about Plan B and Plan C going forward. I'm going to stop here and give it to Steve real quick.
Okay, thanks, Julio. Welcome, everyone. Excuse me. I'm going to share with you some of the national security concerns we have with regard to both domestic and foreign national security issues. Now, look, we've been very focused on the virus, which is an absolute necessity, but there are things going on with regard to our national security that is not being talked about in the mainstream media. Now, first, I'm going to tell you about 3 recent incidents that just happened this week regarding foreign threats. And I'm going to share with you a story that might shock you a little bit about where we were with regard to national security before 9/11. And then I'm going to talk about the 2 emerging threats that we are now facing as a country, foreign and domestic. Now, to begin with, this past week, Russian bombers have been flying over Alaska. They were intercepted by our U.S. Air Force twice, and it seems like they're continuing to do that. And I'll give you a reason in a moment why they're doing that. In addition to that, Iranian patrol boats have been challenging our carrier group out in the Persian Gulf. They've come pretty dangerously close to some of those carrier task force ships. The one thing we don't want to see is people get trigger happy and start a war. But the Iranians are out there doing this. And perhaps the most challenging problem we have now with China, you've heard about the laboratories, you've heard about everything that has to be said about the virus and their failure in letting the world know about the virus, but there's something else going on. And that is a Chinese carrier task force in the South China Sea, not too far off the coast of Taiwan. Now, the problem with China is that they have always laid claim to what we call the Spratly Islands. That's in the South China Sea, south of Japan. Now, the reason why they have laid claim to that is there's a lot of gas and oil reserves that they have their eyeballs on for many, many years, perhaps for decades. So we're keeping an eye on what's going on with regard to their task force out in the South China Sea and exactly how we're going to deal with this, which leads me to this. Why are these countries doing this? Well, China, Iran, and Russia at this point know that we are in a very difficult situation here in the United States. So they commit these acts to probe. They're probing our tactics. They're probing our response. They just want to see what our capabilities are with regard to picking up any intelligence or information and what we might do in case something gets a little bit too tacky with them. So that's going on right now. And obviously, I know many of you have not heard any of this stuff that's going on. And what I'm sharing with you, by the way, all unclassified material, it's open source material. None of this is a secret. Just a matter of keeping up with the times and understanding that our enemies are watching us very, very closely as we're dealing with this coronavirus. Now, something that a lot of Americans don't know is what type of intelligence gathering and sharing did we have before 9/11? Well, basically, we had a lot of gathering, but no sharing, limited sharing. When I was assigned to the National Joint Terrorism Task Force at Washington, D.C. FBI headquarters, I was assigned to collect, analyze, and gather intelligence information with regard to, obviously, the terrorist organizations around the world. But unbeknown to me at that time was that the CIA, the FBI, the NSA, all these agencies had information, a lot of it, but weren't sharing a lot of it. The CIA was protecting their turf, FBI protecting their turf. I think the most damaging thing that I saw when I was there was that a lot of information that should have come to local and city police departments was not being filtered down. I'll give you a prime example. Something came across my desk regarding 2 police officers out in the West Coast who saw something that they believed could have been a threat to our homeland. Well, I ended up with the police report at FBI headquarters in Washington, D.C. So I'm looking at this report, and I brought it to the attention of some of the people at the FBI, and I said, look, we've got to get this information to local police departments quickly. Well, they agreed. So I wait 2 or 3 days. Next thing on my desk, I come in one morning and there's the report stamped on it, top secret CIA. Couldn't go anywhere. It could not go anywhere. So it took us about 6 or 7 months. And when I say us, a lot of those of us who are reservists who were mobilized and put in these positions, we fought for 6 or 7 months to have that information declassified and sent to local police departments. That's how difficult it was to collect, to analyze, and to share information with regard to the protection of our nation, with regard to defending our national security. Now, as a result of that, President George Bush set up this fusion center, which became the National Joint Terrorism Task Force, where we were now mandated to share all the information that was coming into the national security agencies. And as a result, we had been very, very successful in preventing further catastrophic attacks against the United States. But it took that. It took a lot of time and it took a lot of effort. Now let's talk about what you and I and our children and perhaps our grandchildren will be facing as a result of what's going on as you and I are talking right now on this webinar. We know the virus is a threat. We know that the best scientists, the best doctors, the best political leaders on the earth are doing everything they could to fight the virus, and they will, and eventually it'll go away. But we do have two emerging threats. The first one is China. I mentioned them before. China is building a massive, massive navy. Massive, folks. They have been building a navy for a decade or two. The United States of America, under Ronald Reagan, I believe we had a 600 fleet navy. When Bill Clinton took office, it was brought down to a little over 200. And now, with President Trump in office, he's beginning to rebuild our Navy again. The United States of America was always prepared to fight what we call a two-ocean war, a naval war on the Pacific and a naval war in the Atlantic. Well, we're not able to do that at this point. So when President Trump began to talk about increasing our defense budget, he knew exactly what was going on. He knew what had to be done. We had to build our Air Force, our Navy, our military personnel. The PLA, the People's Liberation Army of China, have over 2 million soldiers in that army. The United States has about 1,300,000. When it comes to reservists, there's billions of people in China. All of these people will be mobilized in the event there'd ever be a ground war. So I could go on and on about sharing with you the dangerous path we're going down if we neglect what's happening militarily with regard to China. They are the emerging threat. With regard to Russia, they're a threat, but not as bad as China. But there's a balance of power that the president has to be concerned about. Russia would love more than anything to be a quasi-say alliance with the United States in order to counteract China. China would be just as very happy to be quasi an alliance with us to counteract Russia. So it is truly a balancing act, folks. And we have to keep an eye on what these countries are doing. China is going to, if there's ever a war, there'll be 3 different types of wars. You got your cyber attack war, obviously you got your shooting war, and then this, that hasn't been talked about very much. But the President of the United States, with the vision this president has, talked about Space Force. People laugh, they joke. Well, it ends up that you find out through certain information and intelligence that our agencies are gathering that a nation like China, they're building. There's no doubt in anybody's mind that they and maybe some other nations are building space platforms. Why? To build advanced weapons to fight a war from space. This was why Mikhail Gorbachev, back in the days when Ronald Reagan was president, insisted if that there was going to be any type of the denuclearization of both countries, Reagan had to hand over the Star Wars plans to Gorbachev. Reagan would not do that because Reagan knew that if we build a military space platforms in space, particularly defense, that it would give us a great advantage over who? Over our enemies. And the proof is in the pudding. That was one reason why the Soviet Union fell. They could not keep up with us with regard to the spending on our defense capabilities. China can. So we need to keep an eye on that. So now, what about the other threat? This is a real threat right on our shores, folks. right here in the United States of America. As we're fighting the coronavirus, we're seeing a very, very concerted effort by socialists in this country to advance their agenda. Now, I don't say that lightly. I'm not an alarmist, but I see for myself, based on my background, based on what I've read, based on what you probably read throughout history, what we're beginning to see are governors, for example, and other political people do things that you would not normally do in a crisis. Let me give you an example. The taking away of certain constitutional rights. Let me share with you a few. There was a 16-year-old girl, I believe in Michigan or Wisconsin.
Sorry to interrupt you.
It's finishing off.
Do you hear that,
That's
folks?
what
I
I'm
think
thinking.
we're being interfered with.
After this, I'm going to discard this one.
Excuse me, sir. Hello, if you could please mute your phones. If you just logged in and joined us, we would need you to mute your phones out so we can hear Stephen speak.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry about
With regard to the socialist movement, 16-year-old girl in Wisconsin, Michigan, one of those states. She had the coronavirus. She posted on Instagram, from what I understand, the journey that she was taking with regard to getting treatment. Next thing she knows, there's a knock on her door. It's the police. They ordered her to take that posting off of Instagram. She went to an attorney, and needless to say, there's a multi-million-dollar lawsuit now against that sheriff as well as that department. That is a complete and total violation of the First Amendment. Now, the left and socialists are complaining, well, we've got to follow certain regulations because if we don't, the virus will spread. I agree. We need to follow the social distancing regulations. We need to follow regulations that will help us not spread the disease. But we need to be very careful of is making sure, as President Trump said, we don't create a bigger problem than the problems that we are now facing with the virus alone. In the state of New Jersey, right here in this state where I'm at, a woman from Toms River, New Jersey, was in the planning stage of a protest in Trenton today. She had been forewarned that she would be charged and arrested if she proceeded with that. First Amendment rights, folks. Now, the fact of the matter is that none of these people, including the 15 New Jersey residents who were arrested a few weeks ago during a religious worshiping ceremony, and those in New Jersey and other states who were driving through a parking lot with steel and aluminum cars around them 20 feet apart, threatened with arrest. How on earth do any of these incidents cause the spreading of the infection? They don't. Michigan, we know what's going on there. There's a governor, or Wisconsin, somewhere up in that state, in those states, who's now ordering people that they cannot sit down on park benches alone. You can't go see mom or grandma down the street. This, folks, is a very dangerous path that we're going down. I don't think there's anyone in this country who disagrees with reasonable rules and regulations. Social distancing, it's reasonable. Wearing masks, reasonable. But when we start infringing on the rights of the American people, and we see governors going rogue, like the mayor of New York City, and some of you may not know this, but the mayor of New York City, Bill de Blasio, declared yesterday that he wants neighbors to take pictures of their neighbors if they're in their yards or anywhere, even.
You've just got muted.
Authorities in New York, you're going to get a knock at the door. This, folks, is dangerous. And this is why when we speak about national security, not only are we to be concerned about the threats from China, from Russia, from Iran, or the foreign nations that we are facing, but we need to really, really look at what's going on in this country and be aware that we need to speak up and speak out. I've put on the internet for police officers. Police officers are caught in the middle. I tell them, obey your orders, and then go to your union reps or go wherever you have to file the lawsuits against the politicians who are making these orders which are clearly illegal. You don't have to be a constitutional scholar to figure that out. So here's what I ask you to do. I ask you to keep an eye on things, to make sure that you know what's going on around you in your communities. And if you see any violations of the Constitution, just write them down, find out who's responsible. And you see what I got here, folks? There's two fingers. There's a right finger and a left finger. You know what's more powerful than protesting? Voting. Voting. We need to get this country mobilized and get these people who are creating this chaos out of office. So that's where we are today with the national security of this country. And before the webinar is off, I'm going to give you my email, because what I just shared with you, we're sending out bi-monthly a whole lot of information that you'll be able to have in writing. And I hope what I shared with you will give you a little insight on what we're faced with this now. So I'll be here for questions later.
Okay, let's see. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Julio. Go ahead.
Okay, great. Listen, I always thought that the thing that's the most difficult on businesses is, another 9/11, because the economy was going so well. We were poised to have a banner year from an economic standpoint, and you just dread that 9/11, situation that could hit you, and then all of a sudden something comes that's even more drastic than 9/11, which is this virus epidemic. And so we had to, as businesses, adjust, pivot, and rely on SBA and government bailout programs. But one thing that the CARES package did was do an amazing job helping bail out small businesses with new tax changes. And so, we have to worry about, where we are as an economy and how we can access these different programs. But Mike, why don't you discuss the tax changes and how that clearly helps all the businesses across the country?
Yes, thank you, Julio. And I'm going to switch. We don't have time to go through everything, but I'm going to switch my screen, hopefully. I've been working on getting better on all the technology aspects of working from home. But I'm going to switch my screen to a presentation that Julio and I do a lot to educate family office professionals, investment groups, chief investment officers, CPAs, private equity, and even most important to many of us as those small business owners and operators and investors out there that are asking questions about what happened in the CARES Act. How does it benefit me or my company or our companies and our employees? What can we do from a tax perspective right now to perhaps generate some liquidity, some cash flow, some refunds to help? So I'm going to switch my screen and we'll see how well this works here. Okay. Can you all see that okay? Julio, can you see that?
Hey, Michael, I'm not seeing it, to be honest. It's Lindsay here.
Yeah, not seeing it.
Okay, here we go. Is that better?
Yep.
Perfect. We can see it.
Okay, great. Can you still see me at all, or is it just the screen? So I know.
We can see you up top.
Okay, great. So you get to see the smile and you get to see the top 5. So speaking of sharing, these are the top 5 real estate tips that Julio and I and the ETS team share with our clients every day. So again, I'm going to go through these quickly, but these are the 5 things that I think you need to understand, for your companies, for your clients, for your strategies to do right now. And the first thing is the cost segregation and bonus depreciation. There's a bit of background on me. We can get to that later, or I can talk with you individually. A little bit about ETS if you're not familiar with us. I mean, we're a really unique firm, a hybrid between a licensed professional engineering firm and a specialty tax firm. We have the engineering and the construction and the architectural experience to be able to look at buildings, look at companies, look at cost structures of things and blueprints and the like. But we also have that specialty tax and accounting expertise to be that specialist for the family office, for the CPA team involved, to be that complementary resource to help make sure we're not missing anything on all federal, state, local incentives, credits, rebates, strategies applicable, like the new CARES Act, like the tax extenders that just happened the end of the year, like tax reform that Julio and our team was heavily involved in behind the scenes, to really understand and most importantly implement to take advantage of these things that are available to all of us. So these are the 5 tips that we always teach because they're really underutilized and misunderstood. So the number 1 tip is cost seg and 100% bonus depreciation. It's been around a while. The last 2 or 3 years with tax reform, cost segregation has been around for 10, 20 years. But now with the new 100% bonus depreciation and what was in the CARES Act, it's even more important to really understand. So in tax reform, cost segregation was enhanced because they added in there in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that new 100% bonus depreciation, which now applies to purchases of existing buildings in addition to new construction and renovations of existing buildings. So this is extra important, for anyone that bought property at the end of 2017, 18, 2019, and going forward through the end of 2020, that we can carve out that personal property, that 5-year, the 15-year, and much of it, if not all of it, will qualify for an immediate write-off of depreciation. There's some other things that were changed in Section 179. I'm not going to go into the tax technical specifics there. Many of our CPAs on the line and finance professionals might understand. But if you're, long story short, if you're putting on a new roof, new HVAC system, new security systems, or have retroactively, there's a way to write that off immediately. So what is cost seg? That's the engineering methodology to identify and capture all the different asset classes or pieces, parts of a building, separate that real property that gets depreciated long-term, 27.5 years for residential or 39 years for commercial, from the personal property. When you walk in that building, if you could imagine, that's the flooring, the cabinets, the countertops, the woodwork, the millwork, certain parts of the lighting, the electrical, the mechanical, the plumbing, all that build out inside is examples of 5-year property. Outside is examples of 15-year property that everybody forgets about. That's immediate write-offs. That's the landscaping, that's the signs, that's a lot of different things. How is it done? That's where we use our engineering expertise to go back and capture those benefits.
Michael, I'm going to pause you real fast. Hello, everyone. If you just joined us, please be sure to mute your phones as we can hear you speaking in the webinar. It's very disruptive. Thank you.
Just a quick video which explains that. Okay, I was told that maybe you couldn't hear that video. I'll send it to you separately, but it's a really good explainer of how that cost seg works. But here's a graphic representation. Front load that depreciation, write it off. Even more important right now with the new CARES Act, because and we'll talk about that in a second. Everyone always asks what type of properties do best. Well, actually, it might be some of the properties and owners that are hurting the most right now. Those restaurants, those resorts, those multifamily, those apartment buildings. The buildings with a lot of stuff in them are the ones that really have a lot of the personal property that can be written off immediately. Tip number 2, don't forget about the renovations and improvements of what goes in that building and what gets removed. You put in the new cabinets, you put in the new countertops, the value add. Don't forget the value of the thing that gets removed. That's another immediate depreciation opportunity and potential carryback that clients miss all the time. And again, this is all reminders with an essence of, what can we do now to eliminate or reduce taxes for 2019 return, 2020, and maybe retroactive. Dispositions, just remember that's the thing that gets removed out of that building. The old lights, the old HVAC system, the old roof, that has a tax value that needs to be identified and written off as well. The IRS encourages you to do that. We just need to do it in the year it happens or in the year of the tax return to make sure that we're really maximizing it. I got some examples here with different systems, lighting. I mean, everyone forgets this stuff. Don't forget all the energy tax incentives and credits. In addition to the CARES Act, just a few months before that, at the end of the year, the tax extenders bill at the very end of December, most folks are not aware of it. They extended some energy tax credits and deductions as well. 179D for commercial buildings and 45L for residential buildings were both extended, but also extended retroactively to cover 2018, 2019, 2020. So again, long story short, any new construction or renovations, 18, 19, and 20, those are immediate tax benefits now and enhanced with the CARES Act because some of those tax deductions and losses, certain types of real estate investors can go back 5 years and get those benefits. Remember, 179Ds for commercial buildings, that's $1.80 per square foot tax deduction. 45L, that's the one multifamily apartment property owners and developers miss all the time. That's a $2,000 tax credit per unit. I mean, you do the math at 100 units or 200 units at $2,000 a piece. That's a very powerful tax credit, and it goes right to the bottom line. That's not a tax deduction. And again, that's retroactive as well, at least the last 3 years. We can generally do 2017, 18, 19, and of course 2020. So we got a lot of multifamily buildings that were built across the country that this incentive qualifies for that nobody is taking advantage of. Insurance replacement appraisals, I won't go into too much detail there, but again, our cost seg studies, because we're done by a licensed professional engineering firm and we have the real cost detail of those. Insurance costs are not going up. I mean, I'm sorry, not going down, I promise you, but this is a way to help save on some of those. And every cost seg study we do separates out the accurate replacement cost analysis or reconstruction cost analysis of that building. So please do that. That's free money where we can help save you and make sure your insurance company is in order. CARES Act, again, this is things that just happened a few weeks ago. Again, thanks to Julio's help and others on our team, we've been very involved behind the scenes, helping make sure not only the larger property owners that we work with across the country, but the individual investors that might own the gas station, that might own the restaurant, that might own the convenience store. All of this applies to them as well. There were some mortgage forbearance issues that were lessened up. The qualified improvement property was enhanced. Again, I'm not going to get super tax technical on this call because I know we don't have a room full of CPAs here that want to hear the tax technicalities, but bonus depreciation, and that's why I mentioned it from the beginning with cost seg, we still have that 100% bonus depreciation opportunity, but the CARES Act now applies a potential 5-year carryback of those NOLs. Remember, bonus depreciation creates additional losses or depreciation or expense, which can be used immediately, but also carried back retroactively. So those NOL limitations were also increased, so there's more opportunity there. Qualified improvement property, QIP. So if you have a restaurant, if you have a hotel, if you have certain types of retail type and commercial type properties where you were doing, or your CPAs might have mentioned that there was a drafting error in the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act because they got a lot of positive things implemented there. There was a drafting error which needed to be corrected, which was just corrected in the CARES Act. We can go back retroactively. We can update those cost segregation studies or the depreciation schedule. So those types of improvements that were done do not have to be written off over 39 years anymore. They can be carved out that 5, that 15 year. We can apply that 100% bonus, which is excellent. We can do a 3115, which is an automatic change of accounting to capture that benefit. Or the IRS just gave some additional guidance last week to be able to do some amended returns as well. excess loss carryback and interest deductions. I could go on and on about that. I'll do that separately with some of you, but this is just a reminder that that 5-year carryback also applies to that 179D energy tax deduction that I mentioned in that prior slide. So again, these are all handfuls of reminders of what we can do right now to help that property owner, to help that company owner, to help that business owner find additional tax savings right now, in addition to the loans, the SBA, PPP, and other loans, which I hear is getting funded to the next level again. We can help there, but we can also help make sure you're not missing anything on some of these tax extenders benefits. And again, there's a lot of other things that we have expertise on. So if you're maximizing that entire capital stack, opportunity zones, how do 1031 exchanges apply to your situation? Is there other tax credits or incentives with renewables and that you might want to look at? We can help there. This is a slide that Julio put together, which is great, which really shows to make sure you're capturing every tax incentive out of your property or out of your company, from the top to the bottom: federal, state, local, new markets, brownfield, lost development rights, solar tax credits, facade easements, property tax savings, energy efficiency credits, design credits. That's our specialty, is making sure we're not missing anything top to bottom, inside and out that property or that company. I'm not going to get into all the rest of the details of this presentation because we got a lot of specifics, and I want to throw it back to Julio. Ask him, as a property owner, as an investor, am I missing anything? Are you deploying some of this stuff on your properties? I mean, I know you got some apartment buildings and you got some other stuff where our office is in West Palm Beach. But what has been the most helpful? What has been the most challenging in terms of some of these loans? And what are you seeing, Julio?
Yeah, I think that the ability now to use the cost segregation studies and expense all item improvement property and use that as a way to generate losses now that we can carry back and amend tax returns and get refunds, that's been a home run, and certainly a tremendous way to get capital that you paid in previously that now you can get through these new tax laws. That's been a home run with these programs. Programs have been great. We've been working with our tenants to make sure that they're executing on these strategies as well. And I think you did a great overview. And Steve, again, tremendous overview on DC. And I know you wanted to share some final thoughts as well as it comes to the small business community.
Well, I think what's important is for people to take advantage of the incentives that they just saw. And another thing that's important from a law enforcement perspective, be careful who you're working with. Be careful. There's a lot of scams. There's a lot of frauds out there. Make sure that the people you work with are reputable people, and protect yourselves. And finally, I would just like to add 2 things. One, I'll give you my email. That's ltrogers@ltrogers.us. ltrogers@ltrogers.us. You email me. We're going to put you on. We're going to put you in our mailing list, and we're going to send you intelligence briefings once, probably twice a month, with information that will keep you really up to date on what you're not hearing and seeing on the news. And then finally, every time I'm on TV, I say this: the most important thing for us to do is to pray. I believe in the power of prayer. There's a God above who, despite what we see, he's got everything under control. So let's keep the faith and pray for our country and our president. Thank you very much, Julio.
All right, and I know that we have Q&A now. So.
Yes, thank you, Julio. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Michael. This is Lindsay again here with Family Office Networks. I just kind of wanted to take a minute to see if anyone had any questions. If you do, please go ahead and unmute yourself, maybe introduce yourself and ask the question. Thank you.
Lindsay, I saw a question from Ed on the chat line there. I don't know if you see that or want to ask it to Lieutenant Rogers.
Go ahead, Michael, if you see it.
Says, Are there socialist organizations in the U.S. that are especially well organized that we should be aware of? Again, we don't want to make this overly political, but it's a valid question for what your expertise is.
Oh, it is. Look, I would recommend that any organization that wants to advance violence, that wants to break the law, those are the organizations you want to stay away from. Look, I believe in the right to protest, as many do, but we do it within the framework of the law. And as I shared with people, please don't put police officers in a bad situation. They're out there to do their job. People have called me and asked me, well, if a cop tells me to move, should I move? Yes, do what the police officers say. Go home if they tell you to go home. And then you take the action through the electoral process. What we don't want, as President Trump has said, make a bigger problem than what we have. So do research on these organizations. If they're advocating violence, if they're advocating things that your instinct is telling you, remember Ronald Reagan said, go by your gut instinct, stay away from them.
Thanks, Stephen. I appreciate those comments. I got to tell you, I have a special affinity for police officers. My father was a police officer in New York City and went on to a career with the FBI. So, yeah, I agree with those points. And also, I really agree with your point about, don't complain, get out there and vote. I do a lot of educating with Julio to our clients on tax policy and strategies. We need to hear more of what, from our clients, of what they need, of how they can be most helpful, because then Julio can take that to Washington. We can take that to the different representatives to help implement, right into tax law. We saw it happen with tax reform. There's some real powerful incentives that are available right now, which amazes me every day that folks aren't aware of it. I was just before this, I was on a call with a client from Nashville, Tennessee, to give you a real life example. Because I was getting some texts from folks giving some examples of the type of clients that are benefiting here. I had a client in Nashville, Tennessee with what many might consider smaller real estate properties, a couple $100,000 to $1 million type, multifamily and single family investment properties all throughout Nashville. Saving that client about $3 million. Some of it's going to be an immediate tax refund right now. Also have a client in New York State, in New York City, with an operating hotel, which is closed right now. They really needed some help, not only securing the PPP loan for many of the employees that they have. They're not part of a national chain. It's a boutique property, and also helping with a tax refund, because they were actually pretty strong and profitable the last couple of years. So that's an example of a real life, a couple of real life property examples where these clients are utilizing some of these tax incentives. Julio, am I missing anything else? We got a few more minutes. I'm reading some chat lines here.
Yeah, no, listen, I had a question for both of you. Steve, you mentioned to make sure who you're working with and potentially not working with people that are, fraudulent. How do you suggest us as small businesses do good due diligence on that end?
Well, I've always believed, and I've done this myself, with regard to who you're going to work with. There are now so many links that the federal government and state governments have put up. And I've heard small business people say it's difficult, very difficult sometimes to get through. But it's better to have patience and get through to someone legitimate rather than get through to someone who is illegitimate. So you know what, Julio? It goes back to that old saying, we have to be patient, very, very patient. I had a small business owner call me yesterday. The guy was nearly in tears. He's losing everything. He's just absolutely losing everything. And I shared with him, well, maybe you're not losing everything. Have patience. You pray, but you put your faith to work. Just stay at it. And also, all of us, I'm sure, have accountant friends, CPAs, etc. We could ask them if they know about an individual website that is legitimate, your company, other companies that are legitimate. So in other words, be cautious, be careful, but also beware. There are a lot of frauds out there. So always take that extra step and have some patience.
Good advice. I would say, also to the audience, Mike does basically a great job of help quarterbacking, the SBA loans and these tax incentives. He works with you. He works with your CPA. He can work with you in getting property tax relief. He can work with you on getting insurance relief. He can coordinate all these areas where, he has best in class. Like Steve has said, there's a lot of people you can't visit there, but you want to get a hold of Mike because if you're in small business and you need these resources, Mike has a tremendous, group, team that can help.
Yeah, those are great points, Julio. And the clients that I've seen that have been successful are the ones that we really help to get organized. Because whether it's the PPP loans or planning for the next steps to get through this situation, and we're doing most all of this complimentary for our clients. Probably shouldn't say that too loud, but we get a lot of client situations where we're helping them right now get organized first and foremost. Because the first questions when you're filling out the SBA or you're working with the local bank or someone else's, they want to see the records. And that's an offshoot of what we've already done, for 10, 15 years on all of our different studies and services. We're helping them organize those payroll records, those expenses, the other qualified things that they might be able to pay in terms of mortgages and utilities. We're helping organize all that information and then helping them make informed decisions, educated decisions, vetted with vetted groups that we've worked with primary banks, with local financial institutions, as even some local and community banks as well. So again, we really help get organized. I see ourselves as maybe a combination of offensive and defensive coordinator with our clients and our CPAs that we work with. So that's to answer Julio's and Stephen's vetting question. Start by getting organized, and then we'll provide some of the resources that we think can help our clients be very successful. Some of them very quickly because they need some quick help.
All right, and listen, I think it's great that the Family Office Network, FON, puts the community together to come together routinely with these type of education, these type of resources. Giving perspective there in DC, and obviously Mike's perspective from, kind of what you need to do to help save your business. And so we appreciate the FON network, and a shout out to Michelle that helped put this together and organize it right there. Hi, say hi, Michelle.
Hi, thank you.
All right, this doesn't happen without Michelle helping put this together.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know.
Thank you,
I
Michelle.
don't know